I guess dog
Yeah,
bites are
yeah.
taken.
Don't shoot, yeah.
Hit hard times.
And she was.
We were too late.
Right in the mix of the water.
How are you?
Yeah,
We've
leave us alone.
doing good.
I was on the moon.
I have
Oh,
three
God.
actually. One that I'm finishing.
When I travel, I'm buying them all.
Sold a couple. And then I have one
Or are they
that's
just
training
regular
and one extra
normal
foundation in on.
M&Ms?
I know.
Peanut butter in them. There's a whole basket of them.
Said you-
Anything.
Yeah. Well, with good reason.
God, no.
Nice little, it was our first OSR.
They're like-
Very first
they're
OSR
like-
development.
Oh, my, no, I
Planning
know.
commission ever
Little at the
approved.
edges.
Anything with peanut butter in it, I just
Really never
food of the gods as far as I'm
Oh,
concerned.
there's lots of open space as we have big.
But
So good
at the end
for
of the
you.
day,
Grass
Yeah.
areas.
When you're vegetarian, you
Peripheral.
They need to be
you have
there.
to find things with
New-
protein.
Perimeters. Really
Not
nice.
food.
Oh.
Small lots, but
Oh,
low
yeah.
density.
It makes me happy.
Do I need to do?
Our product is
All right.
a lot of hardwood, all ceiling units,
Yeah.
trim, granite, stone fireplace, all the kind of bells and whistles.
I used to
Well,
be
they
no
not
faces for like
choosing to do that.
years, and then the only thing I ever missed was fish.
Yeah.
When I started eating that's why
Not all I
And
eat.
sometimes I go at a different time. than
That's
I'm
the only thing I ever really
Oh, yeah, she came close.
Yeah.
So-
Even,
Yeah.
But it
yeah,
really helped
I
my
agree with you.
energy level.
You've been there a while too, haven't you? Well, things have changed, but you're right, it's hard.
And I guess
It,
my
Baptists are expensive. Well,
Very
Good.
I think so.
even even doing a new construction, not doing
cholesterol went
tear out,
down, and
it's
Yeah.
hard to spend less than $10,000.
Yep.
By the time you do all your rough in plumbing, and the back of board, and the tile, the
I'll probably eat meat when I go home this week. Dad, if you don't have meat on part of the meal,
time is also
Yeah.
fun.
it's a deal.
Yeah.
I try
Sounds
not
like-
to tell him, but
It'll be a great bathroom,
meat.
I bet that.
That doesn't.
Just your
people
max.
say, you know, well,
Yeah,
like,
match
you
that
tell
manly.
them-
Is that dinner?
people say,
I'm talking about
people say, well, what do you
Typical
eat?
Interchange,
Like,
yeah.
I eat everything
God, I
you
love
except
them
the
over
meat.
eating.
Why is
I know,
that?
I
I
do
mean,
too.
there's
Yeah.
vegetables, there's
How are you?
rice, there's
Good, how are you?
beans, there's,
I hear you got your
Yeah.
painting.
I mean, there's so much.
lentils and beans have a lot of protein.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I felt bad. I saw Kathy last week. She's like,
When
that's
I
She told me that.
I'm like,
I-
oh,
I-
because I was gonna
Yeah.
look at that.
Trader
thing
Joe's
and
has
go,
the mommy
We're out
house.
there.
No, he's not looking
Get
at
yourself.
dog
Clock and see what time it is.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
I want to call the
Be nice.
April
Take
20th meeting, April 17th meeting, 2014, of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. We'll start out with citizens forum. Do we have anyone who is here with questions or comments that do not relate to any of the items on the agenda tonight? Or anybody on the planning commission, and Mark got any comments tonight?
Just a reminder, I probably reminded you all to death on this. There is a training session on May 19th, the one that you've already signed up for, just a reminder, the one at UT Arboretum.
What time is that?
I don't know,
PM, I think it
is it
starts.
6?
6.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another one they've listed in this ETDD newsletter in late July. I'll try to find more details about that.
I think May would be a better time to go than July
Yeah.
for an outdoor
The-
training there.
Yes.
And I thought that would be a pretty time of the year to go to the Arboretum too. Anybody else got questions or comments? If we could stay just after the meeting is adjourned tonight, stay just a couple of minutes, and Mark and I have a couple of questions about the way he sends out the packet. And if everybody, he sent out some information this week, and he wants to make sure everybody's able to get it on their computer and do the things that we need in order to see it. So if you will, just stay a minute afterwards, and let's get some questions answered about that. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the March 20th, 2014 meeting. Anybody have any questions or comments, changes on that?
I'll move for approval.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
I abstain too.
Item number 3, discussion and public hearing. on a site plan for a generator propane tank at the food distribution collection at 12740 Kingston Pike. Food donation collectors applicant. This item has been postponed at the request of the applicant. Do we need to do anything to this? Just,
That'll be on next time. They submitted site plan Monday, so that will be on next time.
okay. Same thing with item number 4, discussion in public hearing on a site plan to remove the cross-access drive connection at the north portion of the parking lots between Davita Dialysis at 111 South Campbell Station Road and RNL Bank at 11405 Municipal Center Drive, 1.85 acres on C-1. Dick Trossletter, applicant, same thing, this item has been postponed. Do
Yes.
we have any information about when this will be?
I'm supposed to meet the engineer on the property sometime next week to see what they would like to do. They're still working with ORNL, trying to coordinate maybe different options over there as far as that access concern that they have.
Okay. So we will see both of these sometime in the future. Item number 5, discussion in public hearing on a final plat for the Sheffield subdivision, Unit 2, parcel 52.03, tax map 152, 27.4 acres, 56 lots, zoned R-OSR, Lynch Surveyors, applicant, LLC applicant.
Okay, as you may recall, in June of 2013, a preliminary plat was presented for the next phase of Sheffield. Since that time, since that approval, the developers have been preparing the site and installing most of the public infrastructure. This particular unit will have 54 single-family lots and 2 open space lots. The staff's comments were emailed to you and also at your places. There are a number of comments just numerically, but most of these are clerical, just cleaning up some things on the technical aspects of the plan. I would note, and the applicant certainly is aware of this, that they're not quite ready in the field for the town staff to be able to sign off on the final plat that would allow it to be recorded and then building permits issued. They've got some work to do on the stabilization, and the 2 walking trail sections have not been constructed yet. They're aware of those requirements that they have to be done, and replacement trees, to my knowledge, have not been added either. But with that being noted, the staff does recommend approval of the final plat subject to the 18 comments at your places.
Okay, so you've got you've got that written up the way you want it in your comments to protect.
Yes, I just wanted to make that point known, that just because the plat may be approved, that doesn't mean it's necessarily ready, to be executed. They still have to finish all the field items, just as we would with any development.
Okay.
You had any feedback from them on item 12, which is that sliver comment, I think, of yours?
Russ, are you aware of that, which comment he's talking about? It's lot number 42. There's a little kind of a...
Yeah, no, when we discussed it in our meeting with staff, when we submitted the plat, the review meeting prior to this meeting with staff, and we looked at that recommendation, and there's really, it's either a sliver to lot 42 or a sliver to the lot adjacent to it, without negatively affecting the lot 41 or 43, whichever one's upstream. It's not ideal, but we do our best to try to make perfect square corners when we're laying properties out, but you always end up with 1 or 2 that's not perfect or square. Most likely, as we see in most subdivisions, it will effectively be just an abandoned little piece of ground. I don't see them turning a fence around that corner or anything like that. So we don't think it's a significant deterrent to the property, and there's really no easy way to clean that little corner up right there without taking quite a bit of property away from the lot uphill of it.
I guess I don't understand that, just based on the plan that was in our packet. It looks like you could just adjust the lot line between 42 and 43 and just have it come straight down to Surecliff Lane in some fashion, not necessarily perpendicular, but.
But it would reduce the actual size of 43 by
Actually, it increased
several
43.
hundred square feet. So
It'd increase 43 and take a little bit from 42. We're looking at the same drawing.
What if you just squared it off and just took it out of the open space? Your open space calculations aren't that tight, are they? I mean, do you have a little bit of fudge in your open space? I mean, well, like I said, to square it off and some. I guess what Ed kind of sees and what we kind of see is all of a sudden somebody did come back and say, hey, we want to do a fence, we want to jog here, and it's just one of those things that's kind of weird. That and if they want to do something that was a retaining wall, you're dealing with setbacks, and you're trying to gerrymander it in there, it'd be a little challenging. How close are you on open space? Is that even something that, if he took a little bit of open space out of that and just squared it up and shifted that
Either do
line
it
a little
this way
bit?
or that way,
No,
You can do it
they're
either
okay
way.
on open space. I mean, I think you have.
I mean, since you're in the process of
+%.
obviously, I would never recommend this if you weren't platting, because changing lot lines is kind of a big deal, and going around and dealing with the plat's kind of a big deal. But since you're platting anyway, and you have some tweaks to do on your plat, unless there's something that I'm not
the
seeing.
lot sizes are still bigger than 40 and 39, 38. So it's,
Square up 4.
That's what we're talking about. If you just shifted that line a little bit to the east, the rear property line on lot 40.
hey Ryan, say that now.
I mean, there's 2 or 3 ways you can do it and not take very much land to do it.
Right.
The way it looks like to me.
I mean, really, you would be enlarging.
This 43.
I mean, you could just literally move the lot line over between
I don't know that it really
43 and
So
42.
an argument. If they want to give it up, we'll give it up.
Well, no, I mean, I guess what I'm talking about is your open space. Obviously, if you guys were right on the edge and you couldn't give up any more square footage of open space, or if there was maybe some reason like we're trying to save a big tree in that particular spot, I'd understand that. But
we can move the rear line of 40 to the intersection of the common line between 42 and 43 and square that off and reduce the open
Couple
space.
ways to do it, whatever,
I like that way.
whichever
better
way you
for
like
sure.
to do it's fine with
It
me.
makes
As
more
long as
sense
you
that
just
way,
do
but we
it.
just didn't want to mess with the open space since everybody
Right.
was.
well, you were afraid we'd kick you back to concept plan or something like that.
No,
And at this juncture, we could clean this up. I think
That
your
would be
future.
such an insignificant amount
Right.
of open space.
I think your
to
future
take.
homeowners would really appreciate it, because I've seen homeowners get pretty territorial. I mean, by God, that is their property to that exact spot, and so they're.
10 square feet.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I think if you could clean it up on the front end, again, we would ask you to do this if you weren't platting already.
Just make it a note of record. That way we can go ahead and take care of that in the administration and not have to come back.
Absolutely, we're not. Yeah, we're taking care of
That's
that
one of the
that
comments.
that tonight.
Yeah,
So
but I didn't have any other comments, Mark.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? And you all have gone over these and are okay with all the items?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move for approval subject to the list of 18 items.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And thanks, Mark, for the size of the drawings.
Yeah,
Oh, is that? We'll talk about that later.
that's,
As an experiment, as I mentioned last month, I was going to try that.
item number.
Maybe wouldn't have caught that on an 8.5 by 11.
Sliver would have disappeared, really.
Yeah.
Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on the preliminary plat for the remainder of the cottages of Price Farms subdivision, parcel 047, group C, tax map 162B, and parcel 8.07, tax map 162. 30.81 acres, 55 lots, zoned R-1, OSMR Wilcox Development applicant.
Okay, this development was before you last month for concept plan approval. The plan was approved with some minor subject tos in the minutes that y'all just approved. As you may remember, this concept has more detached structures. that are reflected, of course, in this preliminary plat as well. Basically, this preliminary plat is largely consistent with the concept plan. There's always going to be a few minor modifications that are made because the level of detail is much greater with the preliminary plat, and you have to make some adjustments to certain things just because of better information. But it still has the rain gardens to the side, and the extensive walking trail network around the perimeter in the open space with connections into the road. And the staff recommendations are at your places. We do recommend approval of the preliminary plat. I think this one also has 18 comments. I guess that was a good number. But again, similar to Sheffield's plat, the comments are mostly clerical. There were some pretty significant comments on the previous submittal dealing with the grading. There were some pipes that were quite deep, and both Darrell and I had concerns about a 20-foot deep storm sewer, for example. But they did make some adjustments to the grading to lessen the depth of the pipes, so we're comfortable that they've tried to work with the land a little better and made the necessary adjustments. So we would recommend approval subject to those 18 comments.
Anyone having questions or comments for Mark? Does the applicant have anything they wish to add?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Bridgemore subdivision, Phase 2, parcel 25.01, tax map 152, 24.83 acres, 37 lot, zone R1-OSR, placemaker development applicant.
Well, this one was also before you last month for the overall Bridgemore concept revision. Just as an update here with this preliminary plat, and this is just obviously dealing with this next phase of Bridgemore. They did elect to go with sidewalks on both sides of the streets to be consistent with Phase 1 of Bridgemore. They still are not, basically the walking trail is going to be constructed in potentially the next phase, where it was going up the hill that we saw on the concept plan, in lieu of running it through the drainage area that you see there in the middle of that phase. The buffer area, the plan there is to count the existing material per 100 feet of buffer strip, and if there's a 100-foot section that does not meet the 12 plant units, 12 qualifying plant units, then those will have to be supplemented to meet that requirement. They, as I understand it, they're wanting to try to leave about the southernmost 10 feet of that buffer area more or less open, so that if they had to get in there for maintenance purposes, that they would be able to do so. Before you are the staff's comments on this. We do recommend approval of this preliminary plat subject to 17 comments noted, so they didn't quite have as many as the other. But these are mostly clerical as well, and a lot of it's reminders like letter of credit, notice of coverage, drainage fee, those kinds of things. As long as the applicant's okay with the staff's comments, then we recommend approval with those subject to's being addressed.
Someone here with the applicant, do they have anything they wish to say?
We're okay with staff's comments.
Okay. Any questions? from the planning commission? Or any questions from someone in the audience? Ed?
Item 5 here. How is this open space upper area accessed? and how-
Mhm. Yep, that's a question. I assume that you would access it from the open space that fronts on McPhee Road. But that's actually a lot that was platted as part of Phase 1. The lot that is, I don't know if I have anything that really shows that, but this, all that was a lot, an open space lot that was, it's actually already been recorded under Phase 1 of Bridgemore. So there was a question about, the new open space lot is the drainage area that's going to be heavily landscaped in the middle. And then, of course, the sliver of open space along the north edge of this phase that abuts Fort West. And, that is going to have to be thought about with the concept plan and whether they want to make that a separate lot, for this particular phase or not. But that's why that comment was there. Because if it's, that's my assumption. The only access into that is from the open space along McPhee Road, as far as I can tell.
Mark, where does the new trail connector with the bridge, where's it tying in? Just north of the roundabout?
Yeah, I think it comes in, I'm not positive, to be honest with you, but I think it might be somewhere there, I believe.
It's right, isn't it right?
Maybe.
Or is it along that fence? Maybe it's along that north fence. Jerry might. You,
It is just north of it. I got a drawing right here. actually.
okay. How did you? You got a special packet down there, Ron. I don't think I.
No, I just have from my last Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting stuff in here.
Oh, yeah.
I got stuff.
The go-to
Well, then
guy.
it's actually a little further north. It's like it comes in maybe,
Okay.
roughly in that area.
Yeah, that's pretty close. About at that fence line, really.
On this map, it looks like it comes in right here along that edge, right there, between that's open, that's just Bridgemore too, right? So it's gonna come in right along here.
My eyes aren't that strong.
This is Bridgemore. This is the
Yeah, it
open
may be
Bridgemore.
pretty much in line with the fence row on the west side
Oh,
of
on this
McPhee
side of it,
Road.
yeah.
Bridgemore too.
Looks like it's pretty much in a straight line.
Where that's
Fence.
developed.
Jerry, would you ever want a walking trail connection on those cul-de-sacs straight over to McPhee? Okay.
I was about to ask, will you address that a little bit, for the people that weren't here last week about the fact of there's not going to be a connection there?
Yeah, that was something the staff, recommended, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, or at least to think about it, as part of the concept plan discussion last month, was to have perhaps a pedestrian connection, down to McPhee Road sidewalk, something like that. That would, that you could make a loop options and things from that. There actually has never been a pedestrian connection shown on the concept plans for Bridgemore to McPhee in that area. So that was kind of a new suggestion, but I brought it up largely because of that new connector that is hopefully going to finish up later this summer. That will connect basically the trail that goes through Wentworth to McPhee Road. But the applicant is not interested in that as far as from their perspective.
I guess basically, from what I understood the discussion last month, is that he simply didn't want just random, easily access from Main Street there. I wouldn't want it. Well,
If you're gonna talk, can you come up to the microphone?
Yes, the concern is security. If someone wants to loop around to that trail up that you marked on McPhee Road, they easily could go to the boulevard by way of sidewalks. To have another access for undesirable activity to the back door of those homes is not probably a good idea.
You know, I think the natural path is gonna be people wanting to go down to the main entrance anyways. I mean, this looks kinda neat on paper, but I think in reality, the natural flow is gonna be people walking down McPhee Road to the main entrance if they wanna go into this. I'll use a technical term, I think this would be kinda goofy if we did this, to be honest.
Well, not only that, it's not something we required on the concept plan. I think it'd be a little unfair for us to come back at this stage and say, well, we've changed our mind, we now want you to do this. So, you know, it's as we talk about pedestrian circulation in the
Right.
future, and you know, it's one of those things that being that it's consistent with the concept plan, that's what we should stick with. I just wanted to ask. I'm guilty of being on spring break last time, so I missed part of this conversation. I apologize.
Well, it's a good thing to think about. I mean, you know, it's that's what we should be doing at the Planning Commission is talking about things like that.
Right.
It is important.
You have any more question, Ed?
I agree with his position on this. I
Okay.
fully understand this.
And you all are fine with the items on the list here?
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I've been asked by several people in the neighborhood when you're gonna start work. Do you have a date? As soon as possible. Tomorrow morning.
It won't be that soon.
Got a little.
Next item, number 8, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend Section 9-4064P of the Farragut sign ordinance related to wall signs for shared entrance buildings in the O-13 and O-15 zoning district.
Okay, I've got the section of ordinance that exists currently that this is related to. Some of you may remember pretty much 2 years ago, one of the entities in that building, Duraline, had requested a text amendment for basically to allow a third wall sign on the north elevation that faces Parkside Drive. And that was, the VRB nor the Planning Commission went with that, and so that did not, make it. What they're requesting at this point is to not change the allocation on the north elevation, but to add a provision for a sign on the east and west elevations of the building. Let's see if I've got, of course, that's more or less what is allowed currently. Just to give you a background on this, the sign ordinance was actually amended when Suncoke and Regions moved into this building. Typically for a single access building, you're only allowed one wall sign. So the amendment many years ago was to allow 2 wall signs on this building because of its size and scale, and basically to calculate the wall signage separately. So you would take an imaginary rectangle that would go around Regions in this case and get that number. Then you'd take an imaginary rectangle that would go around Raymond James and get that number, and you add the 2 together, and they could not exceed a 1-to-1 ratio of sign area to the width of the building. That building is about 288 feet wide, so the two rectangles added together couldn't be more than 288 square feet, if that makes sense. The way you typically, for most other single access buildings in the town, it's one area of signage, one box of wall signage that everything has to fit in. So this building already has twice the sign opportunity as compared to other single access buildings. What they're, and this is kind of a graphic of, these are the sides of the building. That's my understanding of what they're requesting at this point. I think those buildings are roughly 85 feet wide on the ends. So if you were to apply a 1-to-1 ratio of sign area to building width on the elevation the sign is to go, then those signs, the imaginary rectangle area of the sign, those signs would be 85 square feet. If you look at most of many of the office buildings that are multi-story in this area, a great number of them only have the name of one business, or maybe just one sign, or the name of the building, similar to what the medical office building is just next to this building. It just has Parkside Medical or something like that on the name of the building. Like the First Tennessee Bank building on Gay Street, it has the First Tennessee logo. None of the other tenants in the building have any wall signage. And people, I assume, just say that, well, we're in the First Tennessee Bank building on Gay Street, and people can find it. So, how signage is addressed on these tall and very visible buildings is something that, at least from the staff's perspective, needs to be given some serious thought, because it could be, for example, in the Outlet Drive corridor that we have multi-story office buildings. So really what the request amounts to is a philosophical question of whether the community wants to see a lot of more signage on these tall and quite visible buildings. I think from a pure wayfinding perspective, having one sign or a name of the building would suffice. But I also understand that if you're going to lease a bunch of square footage in a building, you kind of want to have some advertisement on that building, and I think that's why they're requesting this, to make it frankly more marketable. So that's kind of a background, I guess, for lack of a better word, of what the request is. The applicants are here. They can answer any questions y'all may have, and I'll leave it at that for now. I did have a lot of other information in the packet that I'm not going to go over at this time unless you have questions about that.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Does the concept of ground-mounted sign come into play at all?
Yeah, that's one of the comments that I mentioned in the packet was, and I've talked with the developers about this, that they could revisit how the ground-mounted signage is displayed currently. I think it looks quite nice the way they've got it. Actually, there's two retaining walls as you enter the Parkside Plaza developments. You have the office, the 5-story office on the east side, and then the medical office 3-story on the west. And the retaining wall just has Parkside Plaza 1, Parkside Plaza 2. They could request to have the tenants listed on the retaining wall or ground-mounted sign. That's one option. They could also look at, dealing with their lease agreements and things like that. But what they're wanting at this point is additional wall signage. because they feel that that would be more effective, and I guess they like the appearance of, the entrance signs off of Parkside Drive.
They're actually asking for 4 additional signs.
Well, it would be 2 additional signs beyond what's currently allowed. As I mentioned, that right there is currently allowed on the north elevation of the building. It faces Parkside Drive. What they're requesting are signs on the east and west sides of the building.
So on the previous slide there, it would take away one of those names and just have one on the front?
No, they're not proposing to change what's currently allowed on the north elevation. As I mentioned earlier, the building already has twice the permitted signage of a similar shared entrance type building. And they're wanting to keep that, but then this is different from the Duraline request, because Duraline wanted to add a 3rd sign on that elevation, as you may remember, and the feeling was, I think, that was cluttering up the frontage and so forth. The request at this time is just on the 2 ends and leave the north elevation completely alone.
If we do this, how does this impact, just strip malls that have an end building? Can people that have an end building come in and say, hey, you're letting them do this, can we do this?
Buildings that have signage on different elevations in the town in general are ones that front on 2 public streets, like Walgreens, like some of the Weigels, I think. Buildings that front on only 1 public street, like this one, currently are only allowed a sign facing, for the most part. There are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part are only allowed the 1 sign. So that's something to think about, and that's kind of why I mentioned it's kind of a philosophical question, because it could have more broad implications if it's changed in this context, that somebody else could come in and say, well, I'd like to request to do the same thing in my facility. So that's a good question. It needs to be thought of in a more broad concept, and not just in the case of this particular building.
These are different businesses, though. So
Yes.
shouldn't they be afforded the same opportunity to have their company name on a building that they're leasing?
Well, that's what I think what they would like, of course. That's a question that, for you all to think about. Now they could deal with that, of course, in their leases, and who gets signage on the building, and you'd have to pay more for that and that kind of thing. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of these high-rise, predominantly office buildings that have many tenants in them, but in most cases, in many of the cases, that you only have the name of one entity on the actual face of the building.
Why have we got exhibit 3 in our packet?
Yeah, that's a little bit confusing, and I think what they were trying to show is that you could, under the current sign ordinance, you could have 4 signs on the front, and there's some truth to that, because what it is, and it's a little hard to explain, but you have 2 areas of imaginary rectangles that have signage that if you can fit into those 2 rectangles 288 square feet of signage, you can put as many signs in those rectangles as you want. Now, of course, what they show here would not work, because you're penalized for the gaps between the individual signs. So these would be greatly in excess of 288 square feet. But you theoretically, the signs would be very small, but if you could fit 10 tenants theoretically in the 2 boxes of permitted wall signage on that frontage. As long as, you know, again, you don't exceed, when you add them together, 288 square feet.
I recall when we had discussions about this before, that we're just generally consider that this signage on the buildings and basically on the hide signs up there is primarily for identifying the building and not the businesses. And so, and that got rid of the clutter. Most businesses that are build, well, many buildings anyway, wherever you go, have one name and many occupants. So,
Yes.
and you generally identify it by that building. That name doesn't change all the time either.
Well, I feel like Louise, I'm concerned about making this change for these buildings, and we have to look at and consider other businesses in town. If we,
Come and ask the same thing.
we will hear from them as a result of this. And we've been very, I don't want to use the word strict, but we have requested compliance. We've had compliance in the past, and if we start making these exceptions, I'm afraid it's going to spread to other places.
Well, signage on this building has certainly been, we've had more conversation on signage on this building than any other building in town. And I wish I knew why, because it's a beautiful building, it's in a great location. You know, as I look at this, and I certainly want to do everything we can to make sure we bring businesses to our community, but, you know, this building in particular, you're not going to see the signs from the interstate. It's, when you look at these photos, it gives you the impression that you're going to really see it when you're coming down Parkside Drive. In reality, you're not. And, you know, unfortunately, the companies that have been in here in the past arguing about signage, and when we did bend a little bit, none of those companies are still there. And so that's a little discouraging too. Now there's other business reasons for that unrelated to the signage, obviously, but I just don't know. I just don't feel good about it. You know, if we were looking at a massive business park where there were some concerns with having multiple large buildings and many of them looking the same, you know, I might be willing to consider doing something different. But I just really struggle doing anything more than what we currently allow at this particular location.
Let's hear from the applicants.
Does the applicants have a statement?
Arthur Seymour, I represent the owner of the building, Parkside Plaza 1. And I have here with me tonight Deborah Petrolini and Matt Fentress, who I would like to have present to you all the perspective of the leasing agents for buildings like this. And Mr. Tim Grimsley with Duraline, who can present the tenant's perspective on buildings like this. Mr. Shipley and I have discussed this at some length today. It seems, I would agree, the downtown buildings typically have one sign. All the banks have signs looking four ways. First Tennessee uses their logo. The ones I look at, First Bank and U.S. Bank, have their logos going all four ways on the top of the building. It seems to be a trend in suburban office buildings, and I'm calling this suburban because it's not in the central business district of downtown Knoxville, although it's, you know, part of the prime area in the town of Farragut, for tenants to want corporate IDs or identification on the building. If you look at probably the newest office building in Knoxville, which is at right off Kingston Pike at North Shore, you have three major tenants in there. One side it says New York Life, The other side, it says Willis, which is an insurance brokerage company, and the other side, Wells Fargo, because that's their headquarters. And they all bargain for those, but perhaps I should turn it over to the experts and let them present their perspective on it, and can further illuminate the need for it. Mr. Fentress, are you next? If he can make it up here.
One thing I would point out, Art, the example you just used is an example I look at and say, boy, that is really a bad signage, because it just really runs the whole length of the building.
Well, it's much larger than what we're asking for. We're asking to.
But your specific example is kind of a.
Well, my example, I guess I was emphasizing more the three corporate logos on different sides of that building there. Yeah, we're certainly not arguing for the size of those.
Well, I think the other distinction, though, and the building, because you have a picture of it in here, and I would agree, in that case, I think there is a benefit to it. But this location, the difference between that location and this one, that one, you see all the different sides of the building, because you approach it from 2 or 3 different ways. There's a road behind it, and you come from you see it from the interstate, you see it from North Shore Drive, and I don't recall the name of the road that goes behind it there. This building,
Paper Mill.
Yeah, this building, you have one road.
Yeah.
You don't see the sides of this building, really.
Well, the building that I referenced actually is one that's newer than this. It's the one actually on North Shore. It sits behind the
Regions Bank.
Or what it used to be, what's it?
well, it's a new building. It's been-
Restaurant there, and they've changed it. So.
yeah, Fridays, was it?
It was, I think something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they have 2 little commercial strip centers in there, but that building,
You're talking about Brookview. Is that-
Brookview,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that's the building I was referring to. I mean, you see that building because you approach it from multiple different ways, and I mean, I'm stretching this a little bit, but it has frontage on 40, because when you're coming down 40, you see it from North Shore. You really can see it from Kingston Pike, and there's a road behind
Scarborough.
it. But,
White Scarborough
yeah,
back there.
thank you.
Yeah, but it's,
But, this building within our community, there's only one approach to it.
well, it's on Parkside, but going, depending on whether you're going east or west, you would have a view of the east or west side of the building, and that's what we're asking for. Frankly, if you're on Parkside, you're not really looking at the front of the building as you go by. There is visibility to the front of this building from the interstate.
There is.
But the tenants we're trying to get in want, and it's corporate identification, and it's not, it's their sign, not any advertising as such, but what really they're looking for is corporate identification with a location. And Mr. Fentress can better.
I have a question.
Sure.
Would the owner consider putting his name on the front of the building so people could say, I'm in such and such building?
He would if he could fill the building without adding more tenants. The problem with this building is I think they've got 50,000 square feet in leasable space. Suncoke moved not because of the signage issue. They just relocated to Chicago. I'm going to let Mr. Fentress answer that if I may.
And could you give us a name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Matt Fentress. I'm a commercial real estate broker with NAI Knoxville. I live, 804 Hidden Glen Lane in Knoxville, or Knox County. I've got about 28 years experience working with tenants in commercial office buildings. And just recently, we had a major accounting firm that looked at 3 different buildings in town, and 2 of the buildings were offering signage, and we could not offer signage at the time. That wasn't the sole factor, but it was a one of the factors they looked at on which buildings they were going to choose. They've chosen a location out at North Shore in Pellissippi. Otherwise we would have had a pretty good running for them because of the quality of the space. This building has the highest rents in all of Knoxville when it was built and filled up to the occupancy of 97%, which was basically about $22 a square foot plus pass-throughs, which is another $7. So you're getting about an effective rate of about $29 a square foot, which no other building in Knoxville was getting that. You had premier headquarters and companies here. And again, as we're competing in the market right now, we've got close to 50,000 square feet available in the building. We've got the Suncoke space, which is 2 floors of 20,000 square feet each. We've got a small vacant space of 3,000, and we've got the Regions has closed 6 branches in Knoxville, and this is one of the branches they closed. So that space is now on the market as well. So you've got about half the building empty. You know, if you take a look at the number of people that this brings into town, each floor being about 20,000 square feet, an average of 4 people per 1,000 square feet. So you've got about 80 people per floor when you're looking at that. And when you're talking 80 people in a company that's looking around for space, that's a very major tenant in this market. 20,000 square feet is a significant tenant for just about anybody in the, well, really anybody in this market. And when you're looking for, when they're in the market looking around, one of the things they want is signage. And that is one of the factors they decide whether they're coming to a building or not, is whether they can get signage. And as we'll have the gentleman from Durline talk to you in a little bit about the reasons why. It's not just that, well, they need to know how to get there. You know, if it's a bank, yeah, that's probably one of the things they need to let everybody know we're here because it's commercial, but most of the businesses in here are not. They're corporate businesses that are working with other corporations, not necessarily working with the public, trying to get them into the building. So as we face other tenants in the market, we've lost one, we don't want to lose any others because we can't offer what the other buildings are offering. It's just a matter of what does the business want? Can we provide it, or can another group provide it?
Are you going to come back every time a new business comes in to ask for a sign?
No, we're not.
What it sounds like.
This would be the maximum of what we're looking for is the 4 signs opportunities there. Right now, Suncoke has the rights on the space that's empty. However, when they move out, the tenant, well, I mean, when their lease ends, not when they move out, but when their lease ends, one of the other tenants has the right. So then we'll have the current signage taken without the ability to offer any other signage to new businesses.
Who are you going to put up where Regions is? Because I'm assuming that'll come down.
Well, I don't have that answer yet because it's going to depend on what happens to the Suncoke space. Right now, they've got control on what would be that area. So what we're going to be doing is finding a new business to move into the space and working out a deal with them to let them out of that part of the lease. One of the tenants in here, Durline, has rights behind Suncoke to be able to take the other signage on the building. So right now you'd have Raymond James and Durline on there when that happens. We're trying to do it the most tasteful way possible because of this is a high quality project. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the sale of this building back in 2008, 2009, and it sold for the highest price of any building in Knoxville it ever sold for because of and again, that was the quality that y'all wanted here in Farragut and the quality the developer wanted as well. And so we're looking for the best and highest quality way to go about satisfying the needs of getting businesses here. It's what the businesses want. That's what we've got to deal with. Again, if other buildings can offer signage and we can't, we're at a big handicap on that. And yes, as we've driven up and down Parkside, we felt like there's not total but ample visibility to be able to see as you're coming one way, sign coming one way, or if you're coming up off Level Road, the sign coming up the other way. But obviously you're not going to see them all at one time as you're driving by.
As a consumer, whether your business is B2C or B2B, I don't think that matters. I think having the signage up there is a benefit to somebody who's looking for, whether they're interviewing for the company, whether they're meeting as a vendor, whatever the case may be. I, as a person driving down the road, would much prefer to see that brand as I'm trying to identify the space as opposed to an address. And I also think you said earlier about it being tasteful. I think it's really tasteful. And I think it's a reasonable request, personally.
I'd like to have, from a tenant's perspective, it presented as well. Thank you.
Is there no interest in a ground-mounted sign?
The ground-mounted sign, one, would be elevated. If we felt like we were trying to put 2 or 3 different tenants on there, it would not keep the class image that we currently have. It would cheapen the image that this project has here in town. I guess any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Mark, while he's coming up, real quick, what are the dimensions of the east and west facades?
I think they're about 85 feet wide
Okay.
each. It's kind of a rectangular shaped building. I mean, one concern I have a little bit, and I don't know if it's, is, you know, the medical building only has the name of the building, you know, Parkside Medical. If you have quite a few signs on the basically visually identical building, I mean, other than it's 2 stories higher, is that going to look compatible? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it would. But it's, you know, again, the staff's preference or position would be to have something similar to what you have on the medical building on the office building and name the building. But again, that's, you know, but we understand where they're coming from as well, certainly. But just as far as purely balancing out the appearance of the buildings, to me, that would make them look like they're kind of a cohesive unit, and they both were basically built more or less during the same time frame. And they are pretty much visually the same, other than a slight height difference. So that's something else to think about.
Will you give us your name and address?
Sure. Tim Grimsley. I live here at Farragut at 620 Porchfield Lane over in Bridgemore. So it's kind of interesting to see the one before this. Didn't know that was going on, but in my own neighborhood. I'm Vice President Global Business Development for Duraline Corporation. I've been with the company about 19 years now here. We're obviously in Farragut. We have about 60, 70 people. We have about a floor and one whole floor and a quarter of another floor inside the building itself. It's kind of, just so you know a little bit about the company you have here in Farragut. It's kind of an interesting company. In our industry, we're the world's largest. We have 10 factories scattered around the U.S., and we have 7 factories around the world. And we're corporate headquarters is here in this building in Farragut. We have people coming from around the world almost on a weekly basis. Every other week, we could have visitors from China, England, Europe, Malaysia, Brazil was just here. We have visitors constantly from all over the U.S. as well as all around the world coming here to Farragut to meet with us about what we do and what we're able to help them with. We specialize in a lot of your fiber to the home. So like if you're here with TDS and you have fiber, that's a lot to do with us, and because we work with TDS as well. But we work with major companies all around the world, and they're coming here constantly to meet with us. And we would it would just be great to have our sign on the building. We do get constant complaints about the customers having a hard time finding the location. We hear that all the time. We're looking for your sign because they expect us, the company of our size, to see our sign. And there's just a little sign, you know, kind of near the door, and that's the only way you know we're actually in the building itself. So the signage is not very good for the company. And with the amount of people we have coming here from around the world, it would just be, we really would like that. And as I said the last meeting, to be honest with you, a lot of it is just pride. We're a very proud company to have accomplished what we've done around the world. And we're just this little company here at Farragut, and we were the first group to go into Czech Republic when it wasn't communist, and we have just done an incredible amount of neat things around the world. And we're just this little company with a floor and a quarter inside this building. And so a lot of it's just pride. We'd like to have our name on the building. It's just, we're a very proud little company, and we would like to have the signage for everything from visitors being able to locate the building and find it. But it also, again, it's just the pride of who we are and what we've accomplished over the years.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Sure.
You get one sign on one side, right?
We'd love to have more, but that's what we can get.
So it depends on which way you're coming from.
Correct, yes.
Which way would you want the sign to be?
We don't want it, I don't know, east or west. It's on the left side of the building as you look at it. As you look at this picture, it would be on the left side of the building. So coming from Lovell Road, driving through, it would get the most visibility. So we would like the left side of the building, which would be the east side of the building? The east side of the building.
What if whoever has the other spot on the other side, what if they want to say the same thing?
Say this, I don't understand the same thing.
In other words, I want his position.
Well, that comes back to these gentlemen at that point, I guess, to make that decision. I mean, right now we're the largest tenants in the building, I guess, with the number of people and floor space in the building. There's a lot of contracts and so forth that are involved with previous tenants that I can't address on that. I'd love to have my name on the front of the building. I mean, let's cut right to it. I love it on the front of the building, but that's not possible at this time.
Okay, thanks.
But love to have it, though. We have to strong arm them, I guess.
I'm going to give you credit. You told a great story. I wanted to get up and say, God bless America. You got
Well, it is an incredibly neat company to understand everything that we've done. And again, I've been here 19 years with the company, moved here from Miami, and it's just a really, really neat company to work for.
Well, thanks for being
Thank
here,
you.
Tom.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm leaning just a little.
So
we'll enjoy that moment. If my own personal opinion would change, I really don't like them all tucked up in the corner. I go back to Mr. Seymour's example, which I love that building. Brookview is a beautiful building. And, they've got them in the middle. I just think this gets a little, I use the term cluttered, if we have them all tucked up in a corner. Matt, I don't want you to get on your scooter and go back up there again. So, but, okay, if I would ultimately agree to your argument, I would feel better if we had the signage almost lined up in the center of the building above the doorways. Is that something that would be reasonable, or do you think that'd be a problem for you?
You're just talking about on the ends?
Just on the ends,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
They have them centered on the ends versus everything tucked up in the corner.
On the edge, yeah.
Are you talking about the middle of the building or?
I'm talking about the
The
ends.
sides.
Okay.
Just the
look
east
at-
and west elevation, not the north elevation.
Right. Yeah, just the side of the east and west sides.
So it's still on the side, it's just in the center on the side instead of off to one corner.
Yeah.
The only thing to think about that, Ron, is if we had somebody come back and do an 01-5, let's say over an Outlet Drive, and the architecture kind of dictates where that sign can go sometimes. I agree with you. I think my preference would also be in the center, but for instance, if you go back to the north elevation, it'd be really tough to put it on the center of the north elevation if you just had one sign.
Yeah.
Well, you
So-
can't do it in here.
But that's what I'm saying, the piece that do the architecture.
That's the problem when you get into sign, because for me, it really isn't even the number of signs, is the clutter it seems to get. When we looked, I'm going back in the memory bank, maybe Mark showed it earlier, a picture when this came up. It's been a few years ago now. The front of that building, I mean, goodness, it was almost one word going across the front. It got to be a little, again, I always stick with the term cluttered.
Well,
I'm just trying to find a way to balance it.
ultimately, aren't we in control of that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are. But I'm just talking about from a personal preference standpoint, if we went to something like this, trying to find a way to balance that. But as Noah says, the design of the building has an impact on it too, as to the attractiveness of the sign.
I'm just thinking about future buildings.
Yeah.
I'd like to take it a step further. Ralph, did you have something?
No,
Or Ed?
the crux of the issues here is we basically tailored something for this large building, tall building, when you had two literally major regional, national type anchor tenants. Now the dilemma is for the leasing company, the owner of the building now, that, encumbered by some of the leases with the prior tenants and the flexibility to use even the two spaces they have on the building. And you have a turnover where you're gonna have, another tenant coming in. It may be a major anchor tenant, but there could be more than two. And we're trying to craft an ordinance, a general ordinance, to cut a Gordian knot of a problem for the leasing agency and the owner of the building. And I don't know that we can craft that in a totally level playing field. We could do something specific for here. We'll have some unintended consequences, I'm afraid.
Well, that's kind of what it sounds like. That's what we've got here.
As much as I like to saw through it, but because there's several encumbrances here relative to just how that building has gotten to where it's at, and then the legal documents behind it that we don't have anything to do with, relative to leases and what have you.
Let me just say this for my, this is just my opinion. I could be content with 2 more signs, and we'd have to write an ordinance that says you can have some on the front, some on the side, whatever, depending on where it makes sense, where it has some visibility. And the way to shut off the implications to other buildings is to say, for any buildings 3 stories or higher, you can have this. That limits, we'd have only 3 buildings in the town, at least right now, that would be, that would fit that.
What are those buildings?
The 2 on Parkside and the 1 at Renaissance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you count hotels.
Unless you count the hotels. I kind of have a thought.
When somebody else comes along and says, well, I want my sign up too, well, that'll be an issue between the applicant and the owner of the building, not us.
That's the same situation we're in now with the 2 signs and the tenant. So it's the same generic, it's just a matter of the number we're talking about.
Yeah.
Same generic issue.
Yeah.
We could be back.
I mean, Duraline is kind of being penalized by an existing lease that Suncoke has that otherwise, I guess they could perhaps have a sign on the north elevation, were it not for that, perhaps. And that's nothing the town has any control over.
Would this apply to the hotels?
No, well, no, because this is, the way this is worded currently, it's just for 013 and 015 zoning districts, and it has to be a building that's at least 200, I think it's 225 feet wide. So it's been crafted basically to fit these 2 buildings, and that's the way it was crafted when the ordinance was originally changed to allow the 2 signs on the north elevation. So if there were an amendment to this, to the sign ordinance, I would think it would be just this particular section, so it would still just apply to buildings in the 013, 015, or maybe just the 015 zoning district.
I have a comment that I'd like to make that I've kind of been doing some math on the side with their square footage allowances, and right now they're eligible for 288 square feet of signs. And as I think Mark had pointed out earlier, they're well below that threshold. And if there's a hang up that I have with this, it's the other businesses that say, hey, I also want a sign on the side, and I don't front a side street, a public street, i.e. I'm not on a corner. But where I'm going with this is if they maintained their 1-to-1 ratio on the front of the building of 288 square feet, happens to be 288 for this building because it's 288 lineal feet across, and they maintain that signage allowance on both the front and the sides, saying, hey, you're eligible for 288 square feet of signs because that's what faces a public road. And what I'm trying to do is when that person comes to Mark and says, well, they have signs, they don't face a public road on their sides. Yeah, but they stayed under their threshold of 288 square feet facing a public road. And I've done some rough calculations, and right now it appears to me that you're less than 100 square feet of coverage on the front of the building. So you'd still have 188 square feet of eligibility on your sides. And I guess what I'm thinking about is, I think that in a way that would dangle a little bit of a carrot to say, hey, we have 288 square feet total facing a public road. Let's be real wise and efficient how we're going to use it. And it might give some of us here a little more comfort knowing that you're not going to come back with kind of what Mark said that you'd be eligible to do and try to clutter a couple of signs and push them together on the front of that building, knowing that your total square footage is 288, which by what I've looked at on this elevation plus your east and west elevation, all 4 of your signs would still be under the 288. What I'm doing, I'm throwing just a conversation out there, maybe for us to have some dialogue. And for all of us, we all talk about the slippery slope. What happens if we open Pandora's box, and who's going to come before us next time and says, well, you did it for them, I want it too. This puts a little bit of a, you guys already have a loophole a little bit because you're an 01-5. You got 2 signs on a single entrance building, so that's something a little bit different. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to make it black and white, because Mark in his office is the first person that the sign rep or the leasing company or prospective tenant is going to come to and talk about this and say, well, you did it for so. And Mark deals with it all the time, saying somebody will bring in photographs. But I think that there might be some common ground here to say, hey, look, you have 288 square feet facing a public road. That's your total eligibility of signage. It happens to work for you guys for what you want to do. And it would also give us some comfort, at least me personally, some comfort that you're not going to come in and clutter a bunch more signs on the front of the building, because you know you got to reserve some of that eligibility for your sides. Is that clear as mud, or is that?
Yeah,
No, I
I
mean,
think
that makes
that's
sense.
part of it, but I think there's another dimension that we have to think through, and that's the fact that we get geared just on the square footage, and it could throw us into a number of signs, and it's a lot of smaller signs fighting each other for whether symbols or words or whatever. And so it really makes cluttered and confusing to people driving by or whatever then too, because it kind of shifted just a pure focus on square footage. Then, you know,
Yeah, how do we avoid this?
Well, we're writing, if we're going to,
so we have to deal with both dimensions.
if we're writing a text amendment to this ordinance, this would be the time, we'd have to get out the dictionary and figure out what the best word for it is, but I'm thinking identity. So I'm saying maybe, up to a maximum of 4 identities. Now, that may not be the right word to use, but that's the word that comes to my mind. That way, what Ed is talking about doesn't happen.
Right.
And it could actually happen today. They could squeeze a bunch of stuff in. I mean, you look at Kroger. Kroger has their total signage allowance, and they got all their different things in there, and we measure the boxes, and they fell in under the total area of square footage, and so it kind of works. We don't necessarily want that to happen here, and but we might be able to, there might be some common ground to solve some things that are giving me heartburn that could happen today under the ordinance, and also solve what Matt was talking about. And Matt and I've worked together on different deals, and I can't disagree with a single word he said. He's exactly right. Even the folks that you would think could care less about advertising to the public, building that corporate brand is still important to their pride. And I don't know how else to say it. It's important to the employees. It's just there's a pride in it that your company that you work for, their name is on the building. Even though you may not have a single customer in Knoxville, Tennessee, that is important. And when you're trying to compete against other buildings that are somewhere else, and it comes right down to it, the signage does make a big deal. I mean, it does. I'm not saying this go for a free for all. Obviously, signage is a big deal to us. But what I'm saying is, Matt's exactly right when you're trying to attract these big corporate tenants.
Yeah, we don't want to turn away business. I mean, because of a signage issue. So it seems to me that we should be able to come together with some sort of compromise and I like your direction, Noah, with respect to the
calculation stays the
Right.
same. We're
Right.
not going to tweak the calculation.
size of the
We're just going
building.
to give them more
So you'd have
flexibility,
like
placement.
4 boxes of, or permitted, up to 4 boxes of permitted wall signage.
Well,
You
yes. However, that doesn't necessarily address Ed's issue with I think the identities are important. We kind of use boxes now, so I think we want to include this identity, what I'm talking about, where you couldn't just still shove a bunch of things in those boxes.
Well, can't you say something like, and no more than 2 signs per side or something like that, so
Yeah,
you
that's-
can't cram more logos in there?
Well, I think it's the issue of defining a sign.
Right.
And Mark deals with this day in and day out. Somebody says, "Oh, that's all one sign," and Mark says, "Well, no, that's 2 signs." And so I think what we're really talking about is different tenants, and maybe you define it to tenants, or maybe you define it by space that is not contiguous with one another. So you couldn't. What I'm talking about is individual, separate tenants with demising walls that keep everybody with a separate identity.
I like your idea. I still, on the sides, though, I really don't like to have all those names up in the corners. That might just be personal preference, but I think it just gets awful close.
I mean, even like on the north elevation, if you did it again, you'd still try to center it on the left side and center it on the right side. Now, obviously, we're not talking about making you guys move your signs.
Right.
But we're just talking philosophically going
Right.
forward. If we're going to address some of these
Yeah.
things and do a text amendment.
And I understand my comment really applies specifically to this building, because what you said before resonates, and that the building design is going to have an impact. So there may not be a way to word it properly, but when I just look at this particular building, if we ultimately allow additional signage, I really just don't like them all tucked up in the corner. I'd prefer to have the
I certainly would
east
like
and west
2
in
signs
the middle.
on each end of the building.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I would not like 2 signs on each end of the building.
Well, that's what we're talking about, having that just a maximum of 4 identities.
Well, my concern is what happens, yes, we're talking about this building. I want to make sure that we avoid this.
Right.
One. But 2, what happens when you have a more square building and we've written the ordinance and that someone tries to put 2 signs on the front of a square building, and it's just, how do we account for that? It could look awfully crowded from the front, and
If you had a square building and you try to shove both two signs together in the middle,
or on the front either side, still, it's gonna look, and then you have your side.
Mark, go back to the north elevation with the 2 signs. So you're saying if you did something like this, but they were pushed towards the middle, you think that would?
I'm thinking something that's not 288 feet wide.
Okay.
Maybe half that.
Okay. Yeah, this is a big building. I mean, this 100,000 square foot building's a big office building.
I think this looks nice, what he's got here. That, because it's such a wide building, that is not distracting to me. But when you're starting to get a narrow building and you've got these signs coming closer together, and if we haven't allotted for that being a situation, we could end up in a situation where we're like, oh goodness, and we've got something that looks like this that we don't really want.
'Cause the current provision in terms of spacing just says that they just have to be at least 50 feet apart. So, I mean, somebody could theoretically put both of the wall signs on one end of that building. Whether or not that would look good, I wouldn't think it would personally, but
I mean, typically the tenants are going to want their wall sign where the bulk of their
Separate,
business
yes.
is. So if they normally use the separate entrance over on the left side, normally they're going to want their sign kind of on that side of the building. But I do see what you're saying with that. We don't want to assume what somebody's going to do. It'd be easier to address it on the front end and kind of have some language that so we're not caught with something that we never anticipated.
I'm going to make a suggestion. I'd like to see us have staff and perhaps the applicant. You've heard a variety of comments here tonight, and maybe go back and massage this request a little bit, bring back some different looks, and let us chew on this a little bit. Because I think there's been a lot of good discussion, but I don't know if we're going to get it quite resolved tonight. I'd like to see us do that. Take a breath and have some people lay out some different designs and the what-ifs and maybes.
Well, one of the things I want us to consider too is we're talking the possibility of other buildings. We can't just look at this one
Right.
particular building.
Yep.
At the same time, we can look at the wording and see if it's, we can take, those comments, the mayor, some of mine, Ron's, is there an amalgam there that has makes sense because we know it's not gonna replicate itself in every building.
Right.
And therefore, it makes sense, just like it made sense when we did the first one, really. It was an exception at that time, and it made sense. And if we can craft that words along with the example, maybe we can have some red meat we can look at and see where we go with it.
That,
Maybe do different visual examples. Could y'all get sign code and maybe come up with some different, and then we could kind of, from the visuals, we could kind of maybe craft wording that would fit what people think is a desirable visual, perhaps, or something.
You could take that amalgam and come up with things that consider the square footage and the number and the placement, separation, what have you.
Yeah, it's tough to, you know, I mean, it's really hard sometimes when you try to craft an ordinance to address every possible, you just can't do it. I mean, it's something, somebody could do something that you could say that would be completely allowed, and you'd be like, gosh, I wish we'd have thought of that, you know, but.
We deal with that everything we do.
Yeah.
You're right.
All right,
True.
yeah, you just,
True.
part of our jobs, I guess.
I just think that we need to be as flexible as we can. I mean, these businesses are choosing to be in Farragut, and I just think that there's got to be some sort of compromise that we can come to.
And I don't disagree with that, but they also choose to be in Farragut because we've made
Because
this a
of the
very
sign
beautiful
ordinance.
place to be. And one of those reasons is because of our signage rules.
Well,
So,
I don't know who's.
I just think it's something we
Some
need
people
to
feel
take
that way.
seriously and really think about.
I agree. I didn't say we shouldn't take it seriously. I just think that when a push comes to shove for me, the thing that really stands out is what Mr. Fentress said about how many tenants have walked away because they haven't been given the branding opportunity. So I think that's important, is at the end of the day, it's, you know, bringing business into this town. So it's a tough nut to crack, but I think we can do it. Right?
And if you're talking about the
Somehow-
headquarters type buildings, you know, that
Need to
kind of-
draft some flexibility into it that reflects the actual size and design and location of the building. Got a building that's, has absolutely no, visual sight range, part of it. There's no point in putting a sign on it, for instance. Got vegetation or hill or whatever. But at the same time, we got places where you got better visibility and it makes sense about it. Should have some way of being able to do that. In the, you know.
Well, the challenge here is
Without
what is.
making the ordinance so restrictive, so fixed that you can't modify it, like the certain parameters developing certain parameters that it needs to meet, and that reflects the building type that's being done to, and then the visual resources building committee may have the authority to say yay or nay on it, something like that.
The same thing, I think we have to recognize that we are also in competition. You know, one of the examples we use is if I'm a corporate headquarters or regional headquarters or what have you, you know, that North Shore Center is right off Pellissippi, a lot of visibility, close to the airport. I mean, you know, versus, you know, more of the clientele that travels Turkey Creek, going to the movie or going to Belk's, whatever. You know, they're not looking for Duralite, for instance. So we are in competition too. We need to recognize that and have, I think, some balance, and I think that's what we tried to discuss tonight. Is there a way to do that?
so Mark, what do we need to do from here?
Well, I mean, I can work with Debbie and the applicant, and if they could work with Signco, maybe come up with some different visual options, I think would be helpful. And come back before you. You know, there's probably never going to be a way to have the perfect way to deal with this, but at least we could present some different visual options, maybe some other buildings even that are in the area that, you know, maybe have 3 or 4 signs on them, but they look pretty good. And some of it could deal with the design and architecture of the signs, the compatibility of the signs themselves on a building, you know, which I think they would want to have something that looks tasteful on their building, obviously, a multi-million-dollar building, but have something in the language in the ordinance to require a higher level of consistency and compatibility, which I personally think they would be fine with that. I think they'd want to do that.
Is that something where you can consider color compatibility as far as, are you talking about compatibility?
I would if
And
it were
construction of
me.
the sign itself.
Yeah, the style of the sign. I'm not saying that it has to, you know, be identical, but that generally, if you looked at the building, the two signs and the signs on the edge of the ends had a compatibility and a consistency to them, and they look classy, look tasteful, which I think the applicant would again want to do that anyway.
Okay, right now, we're talking about possibly 3 buildings in the town. The 2 on Parkside and Renaissance.
Well,
That's a different zone.
really only one, as because there's only one building of this height that's 015.
Mhm.
Okay.
But what you have to think about is if you open up the door, in this case, you know, other entities that have a similar situation, whether they're in the appropriate zoning or not, it's going to be more challenging to say, well, yeah, we won't let you do that, but we did let these guys do something different. So you have to, and again, it's, as I said earlier, it's really a philosophical question, because I think if you start allowing signs on different elevations of the building, it's going to be hard to close that door.
Door, yeah.
And if you're okay with that, that's fine, but it's just something that needs to be thought
No.
about. Because
Not
it
okay
could
with
be that Outlet Drive, for example, across the road, the interstate, could have a number of potentially high-rise office buildings. And do we want those buildings to be identified with very limited signage, or do you want to have a more liberal application of signage on the buildings? And that's not a question for me to answer. That's up to you all and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the community. You know, what do they want to see?
So to move on with this tonight, do we need to table it, or what do we need to do?
Motion to defer it.
Defer?
Yeah, you could just move to that we would bring it back next time. That you know, you're not taking any. It's kind of a workshop tonight anyway.
Okay.
There was no request to vote on anything per se. I think we wanted to present the concept of what they wanted to do, get your feedback on it, and either the staff proceed with crafting an ordinance based on that feedback, or as you have in this case, maybe just get some more information and different options for us to look at, and then perhaps at the next meeting there'll be a more clear direction on how to actually word the ordinance if you want to see the ordinance changed.
Well, I do know people move here because they like the way you can tell when you drive into Farragut. And I certainly don't want to open some gate that's going to change that.
My biggest concern in this context is that the buildings, I think, would look a little incompatible, because you only have one sign on the medical building. And I don't know, maybe it wouldn't, but then you got the building just right next to it is going to have potentially 4 signs. I don't know, it's something to think about.
Is there a way, this is just my thought, it might look a little bit nicer if it was just one sign per side, per face. And if you, and yes, that'll take one of these away, but it's certainly a thought.
Yeah.
It would clean it up a little bit, and you wouldn't have 2 signs on the front and one, and,
Yeah.
just a thought.
Okay, then are we ready to move on to item number 9? And we'll have this next week, or next month, rather.
Okay.
Discussion and public hearing to zone the town of Farragut per the updated Farragut zoning map.
Okay, I did not think this was gonna be ready, but the GIS person got the job done. Let me just get to that here. This is kind of an unusual item, although it's a very simple item, really, in what it's asking. And it is in an ordinance format. That's the existing zoning map from our website. The last full amendment of the entire zoning map was in 2010. We've had 8 rezonings since then, not a whole lot. We were really kind of waiting on the flood maps to be updated, and those just got adopted August 2013. So we've been trying to clean up the map and reflect the rezonings that have occurred since 2010. And also, the only thing that's newly rezoned is actually just town property, and it's the McPhee Park on McPhee Road. That as part of this process, we're requesting to rezone that from agriculture to open space park, which is consistent with the zoning of our other town parks. Should be a no-brainer. And so you've got the rezoning since 2010. You got the park, and you've got the new flood plain overlay, which is very hard to see on this particular map. I do have a full-size copy if anyone would want to look at that. And I don't know if you all were able to receive this map via email, and if so, if you could zoom in and out on it. Did anybody have trouble receiving that, or did somebody not get the map? I emailed it to you all, I think today, this morning, maybe yesterday.
The updated one?
I don't think I got that.
I haven't been in my office today, so.
Okay.
You sent it in a PDF?
Yeah.
We can. I have not seen that today.
I didn't
Okay.
see that either.
Okay.
Check it.
Yeah, that's kind of a concern. That's a little bit of a concern with electronics. Some of the electronic packet information is that depending on the size of what you're sending, we could have some issues, and depending on what kind of computer setup you have. But basically, what's on the screen there is the very latest. It has the floodplain on there. It's hard to see again with that scale. I would recommend, if you're comfortable with it,
I don't see anything.
approval of resolution PC-14-02, which is the resolution that recommends approval of ordinance 14-04, which is the ordinance that references this exhibit and updates formally the full town zoning map, which is, by the way, very much in need of being updated. So, but that's up to you all whether you're comfortable with that or not. And again, I've got the large sheets here, whatever you want.
And you said in that period of time, there's been how many
There's been 8 rezonings. One of them was the floodplain maps. So not a lot, really.
Those significant.
I'm sorry.
They're significant, the ones you made.
Were the rezonings significant? Well, any rezoning.
Yeah, I say they were significant.
Sure, yeah, they need to be reflected on the map, yeah.
Since you have it electronically now, can that be done easy? Is it easy to do it on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, as properties are rezoned, I think that, yeah. Yes. We put this one in an actual formal ordinance because it is a comprehensive full map update, and it includes the new firm maps, the flood insurance rate maps. So we felt that that was a significant enough undertaking to actually, reapprove this as an ordinance, similar to what was done in 2003 when there was an ordinance prepared to go from the old paper zoning map to the computer-based map.
How often do you think that would have to happen in the future, this rezoning maps, that we would have to approve it It sounds like you can.
Well, it should be approved every time you formally rezone a piece of property.
Okay.
It should be updated.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and part of this, we were waiting on the new flood maps, and those had to go through a very lengthy national process, you know, of people appealing and all this kind of stuff. So, and that occurred in August of 2013. So
Really what we're doing, we've already approved all the individual pieces. We're now just.
nobody's property is
Yeah,
being
we're now just
changed other than
approving
the
the map.
towns on
Right.
McPhee Road. That's the only property, and the flood areas that are subject to the flood plain overlay. And that's only going to affect the areas that were restudied in the updated maps, and that's the North Fork of Turkey Creek and Turkey Creek itself. Little Turkey Creek shouldn't change on this map from what's on the website.
I know I asked this when we did that training, when you talked about the floodplains. How often is that revisited?
Well, the flood maps are restudied. Oftentimes, they'll restudied obviously more frequently in areas of high growth, like Farragut. I think that's why Turkey Creek, for example, and the North Fork were restudied, because not just development within the town, but development in that whole watershed.
Okay.
A lot of it's in the city of Knoxville and Knox County. So it's hard to answer that question. You may
Okay.
have some areas like where I'm from in southern Greene County, they probably never update them because nobody ever,
Develops
they
there.
don't do much over there.
Fine by you, right?
So,
And that's all done by the feds.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was in major metropolitan areas in regard to the floodplain, that was all, it's gained a higher level of urgency after the major flooding in Nashville, because they've changed some of the requirements and not to get into the weeds, but floodway and flood zone and all that stuff, people are looking at it differently from an elevation standpoint. And if you don't adopt the new one, which we did adopt, but if we would have not done that, the people that live in those areas would not be eligible to buy federal flood insurance.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, we
there's a lot of
actually-
ramifications.
We actually, when the zoning, when the FEMA information was updated back in the summer, we actually elevated our, what we call freeboard requirement from 3 foot to 4 foot above the base flood elevation, so that new buildings that are constructed that are within flood hazard areas have to be elevated an additional foot beyond what they were before that change. So that's an extra level of safety, which would also help lessen insurance costs because the risk is lower. I don't think any areas around us, to my knowledge, have that high of a freeboard. So, but I think it's a good thing. It's an extra. You just never know, you know.
And it wasn't just this area that was, like you said, there was some in Knox County and some in Knoxville, but it also was like in North Knox County, and so it wasn't just around us.
Oh yeah, yeah. The maps were updated in several different portions of Knox County. Yeah.
Just a procedure question. You said you're a GIS person that updated this. What kind of cross-check do you all do relative to errors and omissions?
Well, Ruth had looked at it when she was here, and I've looked at it. I mean, not saying I couldn't have missed something, and I think Gary's even looked at it. To some extent, you know, I've looked over it pretty thoroughly. I'm not saying that I couldn't have missed something, but it should be very accurate. So there's a lot of cross-checking.
Yeah,
You know, I don't just rely on the GIS person as putting it together, because I have to look at the technical, because he's not familiar with what a zoning map really, other than just putting the information there.
Well, that's my next step. There's an underlying.
Yeah, you have to make sure,
Data here
that,
that's more
yeah,
than just GIS.
you understand the zoning districts, that everything is, yeah.
Okay.
So I did look at that from that perspective, yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to move for approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Gary, do you want us here, or would it be better if we were out there, or?
Stay right there, that's fine.
So hold on one second, let me get that motion on the zoning map.
We're sipping.
It was Ron. And Ed, okay.
Mark, you gonna attempt to send out that PDF again on that zoning?
Yeah.
If you, I'd like to have that when you get
Yes.
it. When you get a chance, no hurry. I mean, you know, obviously next week's fine.
If anyone wants to,
Sure.
look at the big copy, I've got it under here too. It's easier to see that floodplain. It's kind of hard. And I'm gonna have Jeff work on bringing out that flood overlay a little better, because it kind of, it's hard to see.
Right.
And that's one thing with this map, it's gonna be an interactive zoning map, so we wanted to get it really accurate down to, really very accurate, because people, can actually at their homes from the website zoom in and out and see, oh, wow,
Well, all of a sudden,
So-
normally we try to follow parcel lines, and every now and then it doesn't follow a parcel line, and that creates some real issues
Yep.
for folks down the road when it doesn't follow a parcel line.
Yep.
And it does for staff, really.
Yeah.
Even if the intent was the parcel line, but if it was written on that map, then that map was approved,
Yeah.
and that's what we follow.
Yeah, it makes it a little tricky, yeah.
If you recall the Costco buffer,
Oh, I do remember that.
yeah, had to go back and actually look at the
Oh, wait a minute.
ordinance description to correct that. So that was a good example of a mistake that was made on the map that we had to go back.
It was just a little simple thing, but we never would have found out about it until development.
Yeah. Fortunately, we
we-
still had the documentation on it.
And that was one thing that Ruth and I both and Jeff have all looked at, are those buffer strips and the widths. So, they should be accurate.
You got one?
Ready? I handed out some handouts you can write on. I didn't know if you had any room. Looks like the pictures in the packets up all the page. So you've got some areas to make some notes on this. My name's Gary Palmer. I'm the Assistant Town Administrator, and I'm here to present to you the fiscal year 2015 capital investment plan, and to kind of give a refresher for those in the audience at home and anybody here who's not been through this before.
We have some new folks that
Couple
will.
new members. Fairly simple. We have a budget that we adopt every year by law, and the budget's broken up into several different funds, and one of those funds is a capital investment plan. The capital investment plan is adopted through an ordinance with the budget annually, but it's a 5-year plan. And you can see on the last page of that, or the second to last page, it's got an Excel sheet which shows you the breakdown of the numbers spread over the next 5 fiscal years. We're going to focus tonight on 2015 because that's the budget cycle we're going to be going into, and the way that the Planning Commission's involvement, basically any improvement in the town has to be approved or a recommendation given to the board by the Planning Commission. I actually took a look at the TCA tonight and wanted to pull the language. It's a little fuzzy in there, and I think we kind of err a little bit more on the side of layered approvals on this, which I think is good. But I think the TCA just talks about that the Planning Commission or the planning body may give a recommendation. We've always had this come before the Planning Commission. So I think that's good that the board and the administration's open for any other projects that you as a body may think we might want to pursue, in addition to or in lieu of another project we have listed here. So as I'm going through this, if you have any questions about any of the projects, please stop me and ask. Myself or Mark can try to answer as best we can. If you at the end want to talk about another project, I'd like to open that up for discussion as well. The board has already been through a workshop on this proposed plan, and they know that it's coming before this body tonight, and we'll be back before them probably not this next meeting, but the following meeting after that. So I will start with the PowerPoint and try not to put you to sleep. Most of these projects, I think there's only 2 or 3 that you haven't seen before. A lot of these are ongoing and were programmed in prior years. This is one of them. This is Old Stage Watt Road Extension. You all should know about this project. It's wrapping up and should be completed within the next month or 2. Per the agreement we have with TDOT, we have to cover any overrun costs, so we always program as a practice some costs in the next 2 or 3 years to cover anything that might come in after the program closes through TDOT. And you can kind of see, I put some pictures in here that I took last week of the progress out there, and you can advance to the next one, Mark. Let me see if I can control with this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I may be able to control it on this one. kind of hard to see. Can you dim the lights, a little, the overhead lights?
Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure I get this picked up on the video, and it's been grainy,
I don't
so
know
I
if I'll
want to dim
turn all
this so
the
I
lights
can
off
make
or
sure that
not.
we got this on our YouTube channel.
Not very good at that. Let's see.
There you
That's
go.
better.
That's
Oh,
perfect.
well, there we go.
So you can see the progress they're making out there, and that should, again, that should be wrapped up, probably this month or next month. Next program we should be very familiar with, it was completed in 2010. This is the Campbell Station Road widening from Jamestown to Parkside. And we've been consistently programming over the past couple of years the $200,000. TDOT has given the TPO and us through the TPO cost overruns of $1.5 million. We are trying to figure out how much we're responsible for, and we're anticipating around $200,000 that will be responsible for any overruns. We're still trying to figure that out, so we haven't. TPO's taken charge of this, the Transportation Planning Organization. So once we find out what our share is, we'll make sure that we get that taken care of.
Gary, this project is done completely, it's just
Absolutely.
you're wrapping up everything, okay.
Yeah, it was done in 2010, and this
Okay.
has just been carried over from year to year.
Okay.
I can't speculate, but I think that, you know, they probably, some paperwork either got lost or some people probably left TDOT, and this is just kind of coming back around and they're trying to figure things out. This is Watt Road, Kingston Pike intersection improvements. This is kind of a tailspin off of the Watt Road extension. We need to realign the intersection. And again, this is an 80-20 split. I'm sorry, this is not an 80-20 split, this is 100% town funded. And right now, we've got design going on this year, and next year, we're gonna program $250,000 for right-of-way acquisition, construction, and the intersection configuration. We need to acquire a fairly lengthy piece of right-of-way. See if I get this laser pointer working, you guys see it up there, but there's a pretty, from the fire station down, we're gonna be adding a sidewalk, so we wanna make sure our pedestrian connections are made in that intersection. So we're gonna program 250 for fiscal year 15. Here's another shot of the intersection. And you can see how it needs to be realigned to match up with the Watt Road extension.
What, does it get that building?
I'm sorry?
It doesn't get the building there?
The building.
The liquor store, no.
Package store there on the left?
No.
Does the configuration, does
Uh-huh.
It doesn't affect that.
No,
Just everything north of Kingston Pike.
right, right, yeah, it's everything
Okay.
on this side of Kingston Pike. This one has been in the queue for quite a while. This is the Everett Road widening, which Louise should be pretty happy to see this out there. We programmed 3.5 million in construction cost. I wrote some notes down here. I want to kind of relay this to you. We're looking at an 18-month construction time once this starts, so it'll probably extend a couple years. We've been kind of going back and forth, as you all know, with some development out there, trying to figure out the timing of this thing, but I think we need to pull the trigger on this, and we're going to program 3.5 for the board's consideration for this year. Here's another picture of Everett. This one is for a transportation planning report. When they do a project through the TPO, I don't know if they do it all the time, but if they want to do a study on it before they spend further dollars, they do a TPR, transportation planning report, before they add it to the TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, through the TPO, the Transportation Planning Organization, all these nice acronyms. But anyway, this one is, we're programming $50,000 to study the possible expansion of Campbell Station Road. I think that's from Snyder. I don't know where the termination on that one is, but this is actually from the TIP, the map there, so you can see where the dashed line, that encompasses the entire plan. So this,
It looks like it goes to the edge of.
we're required to cover 20% of the cost, so in a reimbursement scenario, we have to program the complete amount, which is $50,000. And what you don't see is that there's $40,000, we can see it up there, $40,000 is being picked up by the feds, and then we'll be responsible for the $10,000 local match. So it shows $50,000 being programmed. When this is done after reimbursement, we will have paid $10,000 for this this report.
Gary, with this, with this construction, I know that most of this is in Farragut, but right there is where the town edge is, right there at that, I forget what that neighborhood's called.
Ridgeland.
Yeah, Ridgeland. Would it extend beyond that? Is that part of their plan?
I believe the study is gonna extend beyond there. I don't know exactly, yeah, you can see where it goes down to Yarnell, it looks like. I don't know if it,
Pretty much all that in the circle is outside the town.
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, it's a rough map, obviously, but Black Road,
Rain challenge.
yeah, all that north, which I don't know how in the world they're gonna do anything there if you've ever been on that.
It's,
On
yeah,
that hillside, that's gonna be a challenge.
Yeah.
this is one of those ones where you know, you kinda look at and you wonder if it's even worth studying, but, somehow this made it as a viable project on their plan and it was proposed to be studied, so that's where we're at with this one.
Well, to me, this is important nowadays because of the students from Farragut that go to
Hardin Valley.
Hardin Valley.
Is Knox County involved with this at all? Because it moves into Knox
I
County?
don't know if they are or not. That's a good question. I would probably say that they would have to be if it's gonna be in Knox County, but I don't know if they're involved in the actual participation in the planning report.
Okay.
I don't know if Knoxville is there anyway.
That would be the city, but it'd be the county.
County.
County
Are they involved with it?
Who determines the pro rata share
Two
of our of Farragut's tax dollars versus Knox County's tax dollars?
I'm assuming that'd be identified in the study.
Is the $450,000, is that, are we, I guess what I'm alluding to, are we burdening the whole thing all the way down to Yarnell?
They don't,
They don't-
it's all speculation right now. I mean, the only reason we put in the design and engineering, is in the case that this does go forward. We wanna make sure we have this program down the line.
Yeah.
So we're not gonna wind up in the red, by missing this thing. The viability of this project right now, I can't even count.
Oh, yeah, if Everett Road's 3.5, this will be 10 million.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, a bigger question to me that ties into this is, the alignment relative to going under the I-40 in Campbell Station. I mean, right now, that's a huge bottleneck.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I
So,
mean,
but how does that kind of, I'll say, strategic vision deal with?
The
fact that this-
reconfiguration of the
that-
on-ramps.
Mhm.
I know that's identified in the TIP right now, but I think it's out 2 or 3 years, maybe even more.
Well, my concern is we're gonna study something here,
Right.
put money into it, and then we're gonna shred that 2 or 3 years with another plan that supersedes this.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I don't think this study comes all the way to the interstate. I think this starts more at a.
If that point moves to here, it
well,
certainly does.
Well, no,
the-
what I'm saying, Ed, is that the study they're looking at comes to, Outlet Drive, I believe is where it
Yes,
starts.
that's right.
And if you look at the design proposals that I've seen anyways in the past for
Redoing
redoing
something
the
like this.
interstate, that, everything from Outlet Drive north is not, is not supposed to change. Now, until it's done, it doesn't mean anything, but on the initial, they went over that with us, 2-3 years ago. They came here and showed some preliminary thoughts on how that would look, but it didn't affect anything. All the changes were between, or I should say, were south of Outlet Drive, where this study starts at Outlet Drive and goes north, if I
My only
recall.
caution is just to make an integrated set of
Yeah.
expenditures as
Sure.
opposed to.
The good news is it'll be my great-grandchildren that will actually be designing this project when it gets done, so.
It's like the railroad underpass, right?
well, the other thing is we gotta keep in mind, there's still,
remember when.
this one has an 80-20 split on it. So that 450 looks like a big number, but our number's actually 90.
Right.
Someone's gonna-
Yeah, the reimbursement costs are deceiving because we're not
Right.
showing that on the slide what our reimbursement is.
If we could just figure out 80-20 on Everett Road, we'd be set.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions on that one? I'd be happy to get more information back to you all by email. I can have Daryl kind of dig into this a little bit and get some more info if you like. And quite honestly, it's one of the ones that I've questioned since I've seen it. I don't know why.
Yeah, it needs to be.
Kind of not my gig, so, you know, if Daryl's coming back with something from the TPO saying we need to program this, we'll put it in and see how it flies.
two hands on the steering wheel.
Kingston Greenway, this is another one that we've had. Of course. I can't remember the year we programmed this. Also an 80, probably 2014, also an 80-20 split with TDOT on a reimbursement status. Total project cost, $1,162,500. And right now, they are in the very early stages of design and right-of-way acquisition, working with the golf course out there. There's kind of a picture I shot from the entrance of the golf course, and where you can see where the greenway would run straight down to the Birchie Road.
I have seen surveyors out there. Is that what that's connected with?
So is this looking like it's gonna be, it's gonna start in 15, it'll be finished in 16? 20%?
Construction, I've got down here, construction begins 2015. I would probably put that on at least a year construction schedule, maybe less.
Okay.
So I think we'll of course, we'll probably shoot to get this completed within one budget cycle, but, you know, we may have to extend it over two. I don't know how the negotiations are going with the right-of-way out there. Depending on how that goes, that could always add some time to it. It's a big chunk of property out there we're looking to build on. So we'll see how that goes. And again, this is already programmed. Another one we've programmed, and we're kind of, I don't want to say bankrolling, but this is compounding on itself as we go along. And I think the balance we have right now is close to $400,000 are the pedestrian connectors. And you can see some of the connections that DPW has made throughout the town off of McPhee Road in front of the house. That, I don't know if it's done yet, but I know they've been working on that. I think it looks great.
Yeah.
And they made some connections over off of.
It's done.
Is it done?
Yeah.
Over off Grigsby Chapel, they made some connections. So we're always looking for future connections. Sue is always looking for connections. This picture's not in the town of Farragut, by the way. But we have identified a couple. It's just a matter of.
How do you guys prioritize that?
We came to the board a couple years ago, and we got a list of, actually it might have been last year. I think we may even come to this body as well and got a priority list. I want to say the ones, I don't have them with me right now, but we identified, of course, the connection from north to south across Kingston Pike's a big one. We're always looking for somewhere we can connect there. We've been looking down at the overpass, the new bridge over off of Everett Road and Kingston Pike is a possible connection. You know, we have the log cabin over there and the house, and that would take a lot of work and a lot of easement. So we're looking at that one. We're also looking at the greenway along I-40 back off Everett Road. I know that's a priority. We also looked at connecting the greenway behind Costco through the wetlands back there. So
Do you guys revisit will you ever revisit the priority list here, or?
We haven't talked about doing that. I think as when I say we, I'm talking about myself, Mark, Sue, Daryl, Bud, we get together and we'll sit down and talk about this stuff. And we have a joint departmental meeting we have every month, where we just kind of brainstorm on some of these things, and we talk about this quite a bit. Not quite a bit, it comes up at times we'll talk about some of the possible connections. So we're always looking for an opportunity to make that greenway connection. Sue's all over this stuff, so she's wanting to make these connections throughout the town. But we'd be happy to bring this stuff back to the planning commission and to the board as often as we need to get that list prioritized.
And if you all, see a connection just, in the town that you think would be something that would be a good candidate, you could just email it to us as an idea too. I mean, you don't have to wait for a formal presentation or anything. I mean, there's maybe some short links that even Public Works could do that we haven't thought of, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
You can see the stubs throughout the town. I mean, there's still some connections that need to be made off of Grigsby Chapel. $100,000, not very aggressive each year, but we're bankrolling it, so, hopefully we'll have enough to make something at least noticeable. And I'll back up a little bit. All these projects have been discussed in some fashion, even prioritized through the strategic planning process with the board. So we've not only done it in-house with the staff, but the board has also gone through and talked about a lot of these things that you're seeing in this plan tonight.
I think it was last year, or maybe even the year before, that we got up and put little dots on,
Yep.
Yeah.
their priorities.
I think that was last year. Yeah, right after the land use plan, I believe. But this is gonna continue each year as long as we have the funding.
And I also will say that Sue and the rest of the town staff does a great job in coming up with grants
Yes.
for help with this as well.
Yeah, there's, I would say there's probably at least one or two people in every department that's constantly looking at grant opportunities, and I think we're fairly successful compared to most. Land acquisition, another bankrolling program that we're doing, and we have nothing, I don't think, in the queue as far as using this funding for anything, so that we're banking $500,000 a year on this, and this would be used for anything from right-of-way acquisition to park property, any property we may need in the future. And as you all know, we purchased the Russell House this year, and I think we have 2 more payments after this one, or 1 more payment after 15. So we programmed this principal payment for this year, and you can see on the Excel sheet, it's got the other payments in the next couple of years. And then the one right after that is the Russell House improvements, and this would be for any master planning, architectural design, and then construction or improvements. And really, right now, we haven't, we're kind of getting into the process of going out for bid for architectural services.
How is the structure of the house? And
We had a structural engineer go out and do an assessment on the house, and came back with a very good, very sound.
I know it's been vacant for quite some time, hasn't it? Is the condition inside,
For at least 4 or 5 years, I think, yeah.
is the condition inside?
I mean, in my opinion, I don't know, it looks pretty good to me. You know, but some of the interesting things I've never seen, I went over there when we did the inspection, and he was taking pictures and getting up into the attic and everything, and at one time, they've had these huge, I mean, I don't even know the dimensions of this beam up there, the hand-hewn beam, it's just huge, it extends the length of the roof up there, and he was telling me, because I asked him, why such a huge beam, and he said it was because that was wide open at one time, there was no upper floor, it was all just wide open, according to him, but he said it was in good condition. He did a fairly thorough inspection, he went down and spent a lot of time in the basement. That was interesting. And if you're interested in seeing the report, I can have that as well.
Just wanted your opinion.
Yeah, it looks good. It's exciting. Yeah, this is an exciting project. And Bud has programmed, or is requesting to program, $60,000 this year for an equipment shed. This is not DPW. This is not their equipment. I don't think anything out there is that clean, but it's the best I could find on Google. And he's got a site for it on the town's property, and Public Works will be doing the construction of it, so it will be basically for material cost.
Where on the town property?
I'm sorry?
Where on the town property?
Over off of Fretch Road, the DPW yard over there. I think they've got a pretty large, right now they use it for employee parking, but they've got a slab over there. I think he plans on putting that on and then putting the parking in another area over there. They have, I don't know how large that property is. Mark, do you know offhand?
Yeah, I don't know offhand now. A few acres, I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized piece of property. The building's not that big. This is another interesting one that came through the TPO. This is also an 80-20 split, and this is for another study, a transportation feasibility study, or a circulation study of that whole area and how it functions. And this would be proposing a connection from Parkside to Outlet Drive, and let me see if I got another picture on here. No, I didn't put it on there. Where that red dash line starts on Parkside Drive, that's in between the Ulta Beauty and CarMax, and then it would extend over to where the hotel used to be. And this is a cost share with TDOT and a local match between the town, the city of Knoxville and Knox County. So this, we've got to program the entire cost of it because of reimbursement, but once all is said and done, we'll be responsible for a little under $7,000 for this study. How feasible it is, I don't know.
This is
Is
for,
that gonna be a bridge?
It would be a bridge,
we're not talking pedestrian, we're talking vehicular.
vehicular.
Right.
Well, it'd have both. It would
Yeah.
have.
Right, right. It'd be a complete,
Yes, it would be. Hopefully.
So it's kind of cool.
Supposed to.
But it doesn't have exit from the interstate.
No, ma'am. I think it's just a connection from one to the other. I think the whole idea is to ease the traffic on Campbell Station and Love Road. This is Sue's only project this year, and it's the complete replacement of the equipment out at Mayor Bob Leonard Park. This is the only picture I have, but she brought some pictures before when she applied for a grant for this project, and it's in pretty bad shape. Doesn't look like it from the picture, but it is. It's in pretty bad shape, so we've got to replace that equipment out there. So that basically wraps up all the programs we've got. Again, we've seen these all in the past year or so. There's only one or two new ones that have come through. And if there's any questions I can answer, if you would like to reprioritize any of these or add anything in here, I'd be happy to take it back to the board through a recommendation.
Let me go back and ask a question from something at the very start. The Old Stage Watt Road, I get questions about that all the time from people that live out in that area. So it's a month or two completion of the Old Stage part, correct?
Correct.
What about the Watt Road part?
That whole area, well, they're gonna be working on the intersection, but the actual project that you're looking at there is expected to be completed June
June.
of this year.
Of this year?
Mhm.
Wow, it looks like they've got a ways to go.
It does.
they got the retaining wall in, that was the hard part.
Yeah, that's a big wall. And I remember they were working on that was, when I got here 8 years ago, they were starting to get into the design on that, so that's drug out for a while.
You know, I would tell everybody if when you're bored one night, look at what we're gonna be doing in our community in the next 5 years. We're looking at over I think it's a little over $21 million worth of improvements to our town. And if I recall correctly, Gary, I think 16 million of it is our own money. And I say that with the, one of the main points of pride in our town is not having a property tax. And we're gonna be doing 16 of the 21 million with the money that we get from the sales tax and some other government dollars. But there's some big items. We are, as a board and the staff, as it was mentioned earlier, I tell you, there's a great discussion that takes place and great commitment to doing some wonderful things. And as you look at this, what I would encourage you to note, there's not nickel and dime stuff in there. I mean, there's a couple little pieces, but this is big stuff. These are things that are really gonna raise the entire level of our community. And it's very exciting.
The outdoor classroom's under construction now, right?
It is.
Yep.
Got a completion on that? I'm interested in things being finished.
September, was that August, September? Because I know Sue has
Before school.
Sue has something planned out there.
Yeah, in September.
So,
It
I
better
think
be
they're under the
finished
gun,
by
they've gotta be
Thursday.
done by September this year.
He's already taken reservations.
Yeah.
Well, we see these projects from year to year come on paper to us, and it's interesting to finally know that some of these big ones that we've been talking about for several years are gonna be completed soon.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Gary. Do we need to vote to send this on?
Just a recommendation. I mean,
Recommendation?
you can vote to approve it, a vote to amend it, however you like.
Do I have a motion?
I moved to.
Annette, did you have a question?
Well, I was gonna ask, I mean, these are great new enhancements to the town, but what about the empty buildings and some of the outdated strip malls and things that are just really sort of bring the beautification of this town down, really? What's happening on that front?
I think on that, we're trying to attack that through our economic development initiatives, one of which is our going out to the ICSC in Vegas and marketing these properties out there. You know, of course, we run into the problem, these are private properties. Hard for us to get people to, you know, go into, and get into private properties when we have no basis to do it.
You know, and I would add to that, Gary, I think it's important because everybody agrees that those are eyesores for our town, but the challenge, the frustration is also there for the landlord as well,
yeah.
because those buildings are still under lease in many cases. So even though they're empty, they're still collecting money on them, but they know if they could break that lease and tear those buildings down and put in something new, they could do better. But, you know, that's one of the things, sometimes people say, well, the
Kroger, for example,
yeah.
is renting the old Kroger.
So
They have a
For
very
years.
long-term lease on it.
I think
And
there's 3 or 4 years.
That
to go.
owner has no incentive to go out and recruit somebody else. But I can tell you this,
But they can't.
rejuvenation of Kingston Pike is one of our top priorities. We've got to do that if we're going to grow in sales tax. Turkey Creek is full, but that means the shoppers are there, but they don't know about Kingston Pike, or at least what they do know now today is it's a bunch of closed buildings.
Do we have any formal, are we developing any formal plan, like a pick the pike kind of idea where we put together, even to attract small businesses? Like-
Well, first of all, we've got to get some businesses in there.
Yeah.
And once we do that, we need to be channeling those people in Turkey Creek down to Kingston Pike. There's more down there.
Yeah.
But it's going to take some time.
Have we ever done a study or a survey or whatever, sort of like the one that's happened recently, with businesses as far as, you know, why they're moving here or why they're not moving here or what the barriers are to them moving here? Or, I mean, just sort of a list of like the top 5 reasons why companies want to come here or the top 5 reasons why they don't. Do we know that?
I don't think.
We know why they come, because of the demographics.
So it's not about the signage, it's about the demographics, it's about being close to the freeway, it's about being close to shopping.
Yeah, and our demographics are very, very good.
Capita and the zip code.
Yeah, I can tell you, going out to that conference out there and meeting with the major retailers, that's exactly what they look at. They look at the pull, they look at the demographics, they do that, the radius and what they're gonna generate, they look at where their other stores are. Other stores that are here already, like Fleming's is always a big draw for some of the major restaurants. Costco is a huge draw. They wanna see those things in your town, in that ring, before they even consider looking at you. These are the major retailers. These aren't the boutique stores that are starting to do the infill.
Yeah, but I think the small business is what gives character to a town.
I agree.
Well, they have, Bearden that they have that cute little logo.
They
that
do some good
use.
marketing.
And they have all those businesses, and a lot of those are small businesses. I'm wondering if we could do something like that for Kingston Pike and get people. I go down Kingston Pike now. I don't even like to go to Turkey Creek, so I make my way down Kingston Pike and do as much shopping down there as possible. And maybe that's something we need to tap into with our Farragut residents.
It's,
Well,
we try to do that with West End. They were trying to do the same thing that Bearden was doing. And
Okay.
The town was meeting with them and trying to get the businesses together, and the owner of that shopping plaza over there was trying to promote it. It just kind of fizzled out on its
Yeah.
own. You know, people just didn't have the time to do it or the inclination to do it. So, you know, if you don't have that, it's kind of hard to
You're right.
make them
Yeah.
do anything. But I think it's a Bearden Marketplace, or however they've got a little symbol and stuff. So we're trying to do the exact same thing there. I will tell you that we're doing better than we were before as far as getting the spaces filled. We're pretty aggressive with that. I've got a conference call Monday with the people that are representing Ingalls just to talk about how, about meeting. We're out in Las Vegas and trying to get some tenants in there, trying to find out what their criteria and their restrictions are. Because like the Kroger, Ingles has the same restriction. They don't want another store in there. They don't want, certain kinds of retail in there. Well, what else is gonna go in a big box but another big box retailer? So we're stuck with that. But it's encouraging because I think like the mayor said, they want it. The landlords want to get that property, or the owners want to get the property filled.
There are at least 3 things just off the top of my head to further expand, and some of them are relatively minor, but, I think our community, and I give Mayor McGill a lot of credit for this, we've worked very hard to be welcoming to folks, but 3 things that come to mind just off the top of my head that we're either working on or in the infancy phase of. First of all, we're in the middle of, or just starting this branding initiative. We've hired a firm that is going to help us with how do we view our town, how do we want our town to be viewed, and how are we going to brand it so we can begin this process of having a look and feel that is Farragut. We just I think it was last week, we did a workshop on our beer ordinance. Now that you might go, well, what does that do? Well, we've had some businesses approach us about coming to our town that would not be able to come underneath our current beer ordinance. So we've spent several hours discussing and modifying that, and we're getting close to being able to vote that up or down. But I think the leaning is that we're going to be able to make some changes, and I feel very strongly within literally weeks upon approving that, we're going to see a couple of businesses come into our community. And the last item that may be kind of small, but I think it got the attention of some folks. Last year, the board, for the first time in the history of our town, became involved with Innovation Valley, which in this area is by far the marketing machine when it comes to recruiting businesses. And they work heavily with the Knoxville Chamber as well. Well, we gave funds to that. And I tell you, I heard it firsthand, they about dropped dead when we voted to do that, because prior to that, the mood was, well, we don't need to be involved in that. Well, we do need to be involved, and the board voted unanimously to do that. And within weeks of that, those folks were out here, the chamber people, the economic development people. I know they spent time with David. They took a tour of our community, and they now have an inventory of what buildings and land we have available out here. So all those things, you start to add them up. There's a lot going on. And I think it's important for people to know we have a lot going on, because your question is one that, no less than once a month, in some cases every week, people are saying, well, what are you're not doing things. Well, we really are. There's a lot of stuff going on. But the biggest challenge is what I mentioned earlier, and Gary stated it first. People sometimes assume that as a government entity, we can do something with these empty buildings. We really can't. Yeah. We can try to help them, but at the end of the day, it's beyond our control.
Yeah.
But I'll say this also, and that is that whatever we're doing is working.
It is.
Because our sales tax revenue for the last fiscal year went up by $1 million. That's $1 million we didn't have the year before. So we're doing something right.
You think that has mostly to do with Turkey Creek, or?
Yeah.
Costco has an effect.
The economy in general, too.
But we also have to be mindful, because, and we talked about this at our offsite meeting here recently. There's a couple of major retailers, and I'm not going to mention their names, but if you read the Wall Street Journal on a regular basis, there's a couple of our major revenue generators that are struggling. And quite frankly, they could be gone, and if we lose them, it's going to be a hole. It'll be a noticeable hole. And as a comment I made a while ago, one of the largest retailers in our community that somebody mentioned just a few minutes ago, you want to talk about a revenue hit, you just lift that building up and move it 200 feet to the east, and that would change the whole thing. So it's all these little things that Ralph started and the board has done, the staff's worked on, that it's little items sometimes. And when you start getting down to feet, that would have an impact of potentially 20% on our revenue stream. That's why we have to be talking about these things on a regular basis.
And we really went after Costco, and they tell us, well, that worked. And they say, we wish we were here 5 years ago. Well, so do we.
Well, but I think the Costco's and the Kroger's and the Ingles are all great, but again, I think it really, the small
Well,
businesses,
But that's the joy of being in Farragut. As a small business, you're treated fairly and treated as the same as the big businesses. I appreciate that, being a small business. I get the same hearing and the same ability to have my word out and if I have issues when we were trying to get everything going. We had the same ear that Costco had. So I appreciate that, and it makes you feel good as a small business that you're appreciated.
The beer ordinance, by the way, discussion has all been driven by local business, small business.
Yeah.
Mom and pop shops.
So this is a great place for small business, and that's what, I think we can get the Kingston Pike, get some small businesses in there.
If we can rejuvenate Kingston Pike, then what is gonna come out of that is a coalescing of, let's call it a downtown district. And that'll be populated, I'm sure, by a bunch of small businesses. It's gonna take time,
Yep.
patience,
Mm.
but if we can do a good job of getting people down to Kingston Pike, things will change drastically.
yeah, I think more of a walking community. I think we talked the comprehensive land use plan has that involved it as part of it, which I think is good too, because I don't sense that's a lot what brings a community together too, are people being able to walk from location to location, and because Kingston Pike is so busy, there's not a lot of that I see or that I enjoy. The parks are awesome. Kind of like move them out towards Kingston Pike somehow, where there's more walking opportunity, but anyway, you've heard all this before.
Well, recently at a get-together in my neighborhood, 4 or 5 people were telling me that the reason they moved to Farragut was because it was at the time they moved here, a semi-rural family neighborhoods, and that's what they wanted. They said if they'd wanted all the commercial stuff, they would have stayed in Bearden or in Cedar Bluff. But they wanted that neighborhood and a rural type setting. And so you have that conflict there, and my husband and I told him, said, well, but we don't have a property tax, so we have to generate sales tax somehow. But it's interesting when you get people like that to tell you what they're interested in, but they came here because of the neighborhoods and the schools. Schools always get
Yeah.
top billing why do you move to Farragut?
If you were to get all the population in one place and say, all right, raise your hand if you want a property tax, because we can do a lot more if we do. How many hands
we could.
goes up?
Yeah.
But they don't see it in that light because they pay property tax to Knox County.
Yeah, some of them think they're paying it to
Exactly.
Farragut also.
Exactly.
I just went up there and paid my property tax. Yeah, well, who'd you make your check out to?
Yeah. But they don't see it that way. It's like some people think that only people who live in the town of Farragut go to the Farragut schools. And that's not the case either.
People in the town of Farragut don't go to Farragut schools.
Exactly, yeah. So,
One quick question before we wrap up, and I sure don't want to throw out a hot potato, something we discussed over the years. I don't see it on our list of projects. We're talking about branding, irrespective of what Press Talk thinks. I always thought the historic lighting was a good idea. I know it wasn't real popular in the media. I've noticed that's not on the list. I don't even see it even 5 years out. Has that been, did the board mayor and alderman decide, hey, forget it, we'll just deal with it maybe when there's we have more stomach for it? Is that kind of what the thought is?
I'll take a crack at it.
I mean, I know it's hard. I'm sure not trying to dig this up. It was something, it's part of the branding. I understand it was.
Look back in your pictures to the one that was not in Farragut. do that.
You talking about the one that we had out earlier with the little sidewalk that
See
ended?
that old dumpy building
Yeah,
on the road?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Notice historic lighting on those roads too?
And that one, the dumpy little building?
Yeah.
I did not see the historic.
Yeah,
lighting.
there they
I
are.
mean, it has to be a dumpy town to have something like that.
Oh, it sure does. There's one right there. Right? Isn't that funny? Is that something that's even a thought to even try to incorporate that at some point in the future? Again, I know it's a hot potato. I'm sorry to dig it up and bring it out tonight, but we are talking about it. We're talking about CIP and.
I'm gonna take the fifth on that.
Okay, I don't blame you. There is an election coming up, so.
It's all along.
And we do have Concord Road, if you look down the line.
I did see it on Concord Road.
We've programmed the decorative lighting.
Right, that would be from Turkey Creek to the roundabout.
Correct.
Okay, so do,
Maybe we'll talk about this on a non-election year.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
yeah, I think
we
that's
do.
safe.
Need
Well,
an
I said,
action.
yeah, then I move we approve this presented.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
Mayor, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we have any new utilities at this time?
Thank you.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
I thought we
Welcome.
were voting to adjourn.
No,
That one,
not quite.
we're not there yet. We're close.
So the April 17, 2014 meeting of the Farragut Planning Commission is adjourned. And if you will, just give Mark some input into